Hey everyone, and welcome to the Coworking Cuppa. It's our weekly broadcast where we talk about things related to co-working, small business development, and other fun topics. So today I'm talking a little bit about books, business books, and business books that I recommend and really like. So this is just some recommendations. I'm not including any affiliate links or anything. What I recommend doing is if you're going to buy books, Amazon doesn't need any more of our money, and but our small bookstores do. So check out your local bookstore. A lot of them are using sort of online markets like bookshop.org to sell books, and they get to keep the money. So you're still getting the same book, and you're getting it. You can even get it shipped to you, but the bookstore gets the money. So check out your local bookstore if you're going to order any of these books. So the thing about me that if you don't know me in real life that you wouldn't necessarily know is that up until very recently, I went back and forth between two states on a regular basis. So I had a 9-hour drive twice a month. And so having a 9-hour drive twice a month up until pandemic times, and now that's a little bit different, I did a lot of audiobooks. So while I have some physical books here that were on my shelf, what I realized is I looked at some of these books and I thought, geez, I haven't read some of these in a while. And what I realized is that a lot of these books that I have are actually audiobooks that I've been listening to, or I have listened to in the past year or so. Because when you have 18 hours of driving, you can get some books read. Also walking the dog, also a good time to read books. The other thing is if you're into audiobooks, your local library has a way that you can borrow audiobooks. My local library has something called Libby. So if you see these and you think, oh, this is great, I'd love to do audiobooks, but I don't want to buy a subscription, check out Libby or your local library because they have a subscription and you can borrow audiobooks just like you can borrow regular books. And they go to your phone and you have them for 2 weeks and you can renew them and stuff like that. So let's talk a little bit about some of my book recommendations. The first book that I really appreciate, by the way, in this, I also put like sort of the underlying thing of the book. Sometimes the underlying thing of the book is not in the title for some of these. So the first book I recommend is Atomic Habits. And that's a book that I listened to. It's really interesting and kind of, I do want to share, and this is the only book I really have a visual for. Let me actually hide this banner so that we can actually see what this is. But what I thought was really interesting about getting better habits is that it has this cumulative effect. And you see that kind of compound. So I really liked this idea that like if you tried to be 1% better for a whole year, you would be up, almost 38 kind of relative points. And if you got 1% worse, you'd be down 0.0. So you would look and say, okay, if you just looked at this, you'd say, oh, I'm 0.03 worse after a year. But if you take that same energy and decide to make it better, you can see like a pretty big improvement. So I thought that was just a really neat idea. And he had lots of great ways that people did this, whether it was, in business. He talked about sports teams and things like that too, which I thought was really good. I'm not one of those people who thinks like, if I'm a business person, I should only read business books. I think I can learn from people who are in other lines of work, people who are in different places, who have different kinds of jobs. I think, I really think like having a more holistic view and learning things from other industries is actually really valuable. So Atomic Habits is really good. And I've listened to it a couple of times now. And by the way, multiple of these books I've listened to more than or read more than once. So that's a really good one for habits. The other one that I recommend is Never Split the Difference. So this is the book I wasn't quite sure of. It was all about this guy was basically an FBI hostage. He would like negotiate these really tense situations. And the only thing, it's so funny because I don't know if anybody else does this, but I kind of remember where I was when I was listening to these books or reading these books if they're a physical book. I remember exactly where I was on the Vermont highway when I heard this particular part of the book. So he was talking about negotiating. So he's talking about negotiating with, say somebody has been kidnapped by a drug cartel and you're there and you're trying to get, obviously, them back safely. The drug cartel wants a lot of money. I mean, who doesn't, right? And so you're going back and forth with the drug cartel about money. And so then, like, his last thing, I think he said, like, okay, we can give you $987, and you know what? I'll throw in a stereo. If you, like, say a specific thing and you add some completely random other thing, I'm totally paraphrasing this, by the way, it kind of lets the other person know, like, this is the absolute most this person is going to offer me or can offer me. Because, and I thought that was like a really interesting idea, especially if you give them a specific number, because it makes it sound like you did some calculations and that, like, you've arrived at this in a kind of thoughtful way. So I really like this book about negotiation, Never Split the Difference, because so the guy had really great stories, obviously. I mean, he's gone to other countries and he's, like I said, he's been in these really tense negotiation situations where, people's lives are at stake, or like there's a lot of money at stake. And he talks about kind of what he learned doing that and how, you can kind of take these mindsets and, like, use them in negotiating other things in your life. And let's face it, we all have to negotiate some things in our lives. So that ends up being pretty good. I appreciate The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Darn. It's a good kind of attitude adjustment type book. The guy's funny. I sort of got into this author because he wrote this essay called Love is Not Enough. And he was kind of criticizing the Beatles a little bit in it. And I remember this guy I was dating, like, loved the Beatles and thought this was blasphemy to, give John Lennon a hard time. But he writes these really great essays about relationships and other things like that. But this book is pretty good if you want to just kind of get in the right mindset. The part of the book that I'm thinking of right now is he talks about being able to eat a poo sandwich. So, for example, lots of people want to be musicians, and they think of the idea of being a musician as being on stage and having lots of adoring fans and the after party. But they don't think about hauling gear, trying to get paid for your contract, all the like really crappy parts about it. And a lot of life, when you're doing something that's meaningful to you, is being able to eat the poop sandwich. And the thing is, if you're eating the particular poop sandwich of your situation, if you're willing to do that, it means you really love it. And that, every job, no matter how glamorous it is, has some aspect that we just have to get through. And if you just like the romantic idea of a person or a job or something, that it's probably not going to work out for you. And I thought that was really good. Anyway, so he's entertaining. So whenever I need to kind of stay awake on the drive, that's what I'll put on. The other book that I really like a lot in terms of how it frames creativity and adding creativity to your life is the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I'm not like there's some people, by the way, who like make pilgrimages to go see where Elizabeth Gilbert is, and they're super into everything Elizabeth Gilbert has ever done. I like this book as a complete kind of standalone thing because it talks about the fact that as humans, we were made to create. And a part of the book that gets quoted a lot is, if you're an artist or a creative person, you can't expect your art to pay for itself. You have to give it room to play in your life, And she talks about, how she, worked waitressing jobs while she wrote her books because she didn't want to give her books the pressure of having to make the money to support her life. So, it kind of, to me, it frames this idea of doing creativity, whether it's professionally or not, but also like in encouraging people to do that without saying, oh, you're an artist, you'll never make any money. That's not what the book is about at all. The book is about kind of framing your artistic pursuits, your creative pursuits within your life and how other people have done that. I learn a lot by like seeing how other people do things. And speaking of that, like basically any biography or autobiography, I really enjoy. I read Richard Branson's. I really love Tina Fey's Bossy Pants book. I think it's brilliant. And if you've ever seen me walking my dog and chuckling, I might be re-listening to that book. But I love learning from other people's lives. I think it's really valuable to see how they approach things. And it puts you in different situations that makes you think, oh, I'd love to be in that situation, or wow, I'm really glad I wasn't in that situation. So, and by the way, like, I'm not too precious about my biographies. I bought this book at, there's this store called Martin's, if you're ever in Maine, like, it's a discount store. I bought this book. It's about a woman who started a lipstick company. And it's super interesting, like, I bought it for $2 at Martin's, just a total autobiography of someone who started a lipstick business. So yeah, any biography, like, I think is something that we can learn from. Classic, and this is a little retro here, the 4-hour work week. Now, here's the thing. Do I really think you can work for 4 hours a week and make enough money to live, or make money in an ethical way? I don't know. But there's a lot of kind of gems in this book in terms of how to approach work. In one of the parts, he talks about, one of his businesses was he sold supplements online. And this is kind of before lots of people were doing that and lots of companies were doing that. So, I mean, I think this book is a good 10 or 15 years old. Like, it is a little retro, but he talks in the book about how he's growing his company. And so he's had to hire like customer service people to answer the phone, to answer emails. And at first, what he realized is he was spending a lot of time dealing with issues. So for example, someone wants their money back. And so the customer service person would email Tim Ferriss and say, hey, and so he was spending all his time kind of dealing with these little like whatever issues. So what he decided is, he was like, okay, and he told his customer service people, if you can solve the problem for under $25, just solve it. Otherwise, then escalate it to me. So he gave his customer service people the power to maybe issue a refund or give a credit or whatever. And what he noticed was his emails went way down. The stuff, he wasn't dealing with this minutia anymore. He was letting the people who were on the front line, he was giving them agency to like solve the problem. So then he upped it to like $50. I think the highest he ever went was $100. But point being is, you have to kind of look at things, and and he has lots of really great like stories and processes of how to sort of make you be able to take your work and maybe work remotely or create a second stream of income that is a little bit more hands-off maybe than your full-time job, if you have a full-time job. So I think that's a really classic choice to talk about, like, sort of efficiency, productivity. You can tell this guy is like obsessed with those things. And I appreciate systems people because I am somewhat of one, but also I sometimes need people to point out where systems could exist. And I feel like this book does a pretty good job of doing that. Another book I recommend, which I actually have physically here, is Company of One. So I have several copies of this here. I pre-bought it when it, because I follow this guy, I get his newsletter. And so when the book came out, I was on pre-order for it. So I got a few copies. But this idea that, I think, we're all told about these companies that started in someone's basement or someone's garage, and then they grow to like, a company with like 10,000 employees or something like that. When the reality is that some of us just want to run a company that, sustains us, that it has meaningful work, that kind of thing. So the subtitle is Why Staying Small is the Next Big Thing for Business. So now you don't have to be a solopreneur to be able to appreciate something like this. You could have a relatively small company, or maybe you're not building your company so that it's going to be acquired someday for like $1 gazillion. Maybe instead you just, you know what I mean? You're staying small intentionally. You're not staying small because you're scared to get big. You're staying small because it fits your lifestyle better, or, or there's other things that you want to do. And anyway, like, I think it's a pretty good way of sort of, because all of our lives, we've been told to like, you should get bigger, you should do more, whatever. This idea that like, I'm going to intentionally run my company differently, I think is a really cool idea. Now, this next pick also is a little bit retro, but I will tell you why I'm putting it here. So if you are into blogging at all, or were into blogging in the early 2000s, you probably heard of this guy, Darren Rouse, pro blogger. Now, it has a kind of douchey second title. the secrets to blogging your way to a 6-figure income. Ignore that. Ignore that. If you just want to know more about blogging, this is a really good book. And it's what I found was when I was first starting, even after I had been blogging for a couple of years, I would read like, one chapter and then I'd be like, whoa, I need to let this digest. A lot of the stuff obviously is a little bit different with the, rise of social media and things like that. But a lot of the principles of it are still pretty solid. And if you want to make money off of a blog, for a while, he does have this on his website. He has a, I don't know if it's a monthly or quarterly blogging income breakdown. So he actually shows, he's like, listen, I'm a professional blogger and this is how I make my money. And he does it in a little pie chart. He's like, okay, I make 50% from like speaking engagements so you have an idea of kind of how somebody who makes a full-time living blogging, what they actually do to earn their money. And I think it's all like relative numbers. I'm not sure if he puts specific like, oh, I earned $10,000 doing this or whatever, but it's a really good book if you want to kind of understand blogging, if you want to understand how to approach a blog from like a content point of view, and then like an SEO and a monetization point of view. I think it's still pretty good, even now. If you want to get better at the writing part of stuff, this is one I have a physical copy of because one time I adjunct, I don't know how to say that, a college class about basically online writing. And we use this basically as the textbook. And it's a really good book, and it talks about writing different kinds of copy, writing for social, writing more long form content, and kind of like the sort of, not just the grammatical rules of that, but also kind of the approach of doing something like that. I liked that I wanted to give my students a book that they could buy, I thought would be useful to have that wasn't really expensive, because I didn't want to make them buy a really expensive textbook, but I wanted them to have something pretty useful. This is pretty good. I reference it sometimes when I'm looking for ideas for approaching a certain kind of content. So yeah, and most of us have to write something, even if you're like, I'm not a full-time marketer, Nicole, I do whatever. You probably have to write emails. You probably have to maybe you have to write a press release, that kind of thing. It's just good to have, and there's lots of really great, on my shelf that I didn't pull down are like things like Stephen King's book about writing, Anne Lamont's book about, and that's more of the creative process of writing. This is more of a little bit of the mechanics in there as well. Another book that I recommend, and it's funny because a lot of people feel like they have to, buy an MLM starter kit, or they have to invest like thousands of dollars into like buying furniture in a co-working space. Just kidding. No one thinks that. But I really like this book because it's approaching the starting of a business like bootstrapping. And even if you're running a business that has money, it's kind of nice to kind of see how these people have seen needs and started businesses with almost no money. And in some cases, no money at all. This guy also has a podcast called Side Hustle School, where he basically profiles people who have started a side business in these short little vignettes, of between 5 and 10 minutes long. All these different kinds of businesses in different parts of the country, different parts of the world in some cases. But I like this book and actually Matt Baya, shout out to Matt Baya, sent me this book years ago. And I still have it because I think it's a really useful approach to kind of think about, even if you're running a business and you're thinking like, oh, I'm thinking of starting in this other kind of service or whatever, seeing how other people have started something from scratch, have researched their market, there's actually in here, and actually you can look it up. There's a, product launch checklist. So if you have a new product or service and you wanted to think about, okay, like what do I need to do to get it out there? It's a pretty comprehensive list of how to launch. And the PDF is free on his website. You don't have to buy the book to get that, but it's in here as well. So I like it. It's good for case studies. Like I said, for me, I like learning from how other people do things. I think that's really, like I said, I think that's how I learn without having to make the mistakes myself. Right. I talked about this in the live stream on my marketing business page. Every year I go through this goal setting protocol in December. It's called Your Best Year Yet. It has an exclamation mark. I think the new book doesn't have clouds on the back of it. This is another Matt Baya. Matt Baya like sends me a lot of good books, but what it is a series of 10 questions, and they recommend kind of doing it over the course of a few hours. So I usually hold a little kind of mini retreat with myself, and I go through the questions and I answer them. And what's nice is since I've done it every year for 5 or 6 years at this point, I can go back and I can read kind of what I can read what I was thinking, and kind of how and see what my goals were and see that I actually got to them, which is kind of neat. So some kind of goal setting protocol I think is great. It doesn't have to be this particular book. Whatever speaks to you. There's lots of good ones out there, but I think it's nice to kind of inventory things. There's a therapist that I know who uses this unraveling. It's the same idea where you unravel the year. And I think if you Google unraveling, it might come up. You unravel the year and then you sort of kind of reset yourself for the upcoming year. There's lots of different ways to do this, but yeah, that's something I recommend doing, even if you just take an hour out of this kind of busy time of year to sort of go through some of this stuff and write things down. It's amazing when you're thinking about what you want to do, how much of it actually does end up getting done. And my final book recommendation is Tiny MBA by Alex Hillman. So here is a good place to shout out him for a couple of reasons. Number one, he is the godfather of co-working. I don't know. He's actually not that. I think he's like the same age as me. So he's not he's not this old man figure. But he is somebody who he runs Indie Hall in Philadelphia, which is this really prolific co-working space with hundreds of members. He talks about co-working he's like the co-working guy, but he also has lots of business development experience. So he wrote this book called Tiny MBA. It just came out a couple of months ago, and he's good. He knows a lot of stuff. He's really good at being succinct in his advice. And the book, obviously, it's well designed. I don't have it physically here, but there's another book that I forgot, and so I didn't write the title down here. But another thing I would recommend doing is getting some kind of financial planning type book, whether it's whatever. I think there's one called Your Money or Your Life. The one I have is called Die Broke, but some kind of money book that will get you thinking about sort of your financial situation and how you want to, and get you think about how to set things up. So for me, the idea of the die broke idea is that you spend out and you basically, and as somebody who doesn't have any children and has never planned to have children, that kind of speaks to me. But there are other protocols and there's other kind of financial plans. I think Your Money or Your Life, the main thing is that you spend, I think, 50% of your income on your necessities. You spend 30% of your income on your non-necessities, and then you save 20% of your income. It's something like that. But find a protocol that works for you, dive in. And I think that would be a good book for anybody to read. Those of you who haven't necessarily followed me forever and ever, I started a personal finance blog in 2007. That's how I got into all this. I wanted to be a writer, but nobody would publish me anywhere. So I just started my own website. I started blogging about personal finance, and then the financial crisis hit. And then suddenly everybody wanted to read personal finance blogs. So, and I realized that I put as much energy into writing and doing the blog, whether 5 people read it or 500 people read it. So I obviously wanted 500 people to read it. So here I am today with a couple of co-working spaces and a marketing company. So I think the personal finance thing is something we all at least need to have a handle on. So find a book that speaks to you, find someone's approach you appreciate. And, there's lots of great approaches out there. So those are some of the books I like. They can, like I said, they can be physical books or they can be audiobooks, whatever. I think it's good to learn new things. And if you have books that you like, feel free to drop them in the comments so that I can see them, because I'm always looking for new stuff to read. And if you, have any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to pop me an email at info@anchorspace.com. I'm always down to talk topics. Next week, we're going to be talking about LinkedIn. So on my marketing channel, we'll be and on this channel, we'll be talking about different parts of LinkedIn. So one from a marketing person who isn't me, and one from one of my friends who runs a nonprofit and uses LinkedIn to talk to people that she wouldn't normally get to talk to, and how she does that and why she does that and kind of her findings with that. So stay tuned for that. And thanks so much for spending part of your day with me, having a little cup of whatever you like to have a cup of. So nice to see you, and have a great rest of your day. And I will see you next week, if not sooner. Take care.